My friend came to yeshiva today. One of my co-workers is in yeshiva in the morning. Two moifsim. One moifis I'm not going to tell you. The other moifis is supposed to rain all morning. It stopped raining just for the picture. Then it started raining again. A kleine moifis. People on shlichus get used to the fact that moifsim does it 11. That's what it is. Moifsim. Never says by all of us it's that way, but by shluchim it's pashat by his galas. Okay. We're learning Tanya. Please. Peirik Yud. And we're holding Azoy. Let me tell you exactly where we're holding. We're holding where it says V'tzadik she'enei gomor. So we're holding. V'tzadik she'enei gomor, which is on page Tezvav or 29, depending on your reference. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 lines from the top of page Tezvav. Yeah, it says V'tzadik she'enei gomor. That's where we're holding. We learned about Tzadik Gomer. We're going to go back to Tzadik Gomer next week, Mr. Shem. But Beina the Beina, yeah, between last week and next week, it's Tzadik she'enei Gomer. Now, what did we learn about Tzadik Gomer? We learned an interesting idea. That is that the classic term is Beis Kavim Shkulim. That's the Lashon HaChasidus in the Maimorim. Beis Kavim Shkulim. There are two equal and opposite poles. They're equal and opposite, always. Lefi erech hasineh l'ra is erech ha'ava l'toiv. And the other way around. Right? Oya ve'Hashem sinu ra. That's the pasuk. A tzaddik is Oya ve'Hashem sinu ra. And it goes both ways. If you're Oya ve'Hashem, you're a Seinei Ra. If you're a Seinei Ra, you're Oya ve'Hashem, because they're Beis Kavim Shkulim. So a tzaddik gomu is Oya ve'Hashem, absolutely. Because he's Seinei Ra b'tachlis. And if you were here last week, I brought out the point that sinner betachlis is a cold sinner. It's not with regesh. When you hate something absolutely, you're not emotional about it, because the emotion actually comes from the connection. Something that you have a connection to, and you hate, you're excited about it because you hate the part of it that's in you. But if there's none of it in you, it's a cold sinner. You know, I'm thinking about the Alter Rebbe's hate for Napoleon. Alter Rebbe said about Napoleon, Tachlis Simas Nesan, I hate him so much, you can't hate more than I hate Napoleon. Imagine Alter Rebbe should say, but Napoleon was tumah. So it's not that Alter Rebbe walked around the whole day all excited. He wasn't an emotional sin. It was an atzmiyasdik sin. When you have a connection to something, so then the hate has passion, because the fact that the little bit of it that's in you creates that resistance, that friction, and that noise. Yeah. But a tzaddik gomer loves the Eibishter completely, because by him the Ra was mehapach l'teiv. And the Rebbe uses the expression memele. When you kill the Yetzer Ra completely, memele, automatically it becomes the second Yetzer Teiv, and then the hatred for evil is absolute, and it goes both ways. One of the ideas which is mentioned is the two words sinah and mius. Sinah and mius. And the Rebbe, the Mafarshim here, the Rebbe, it's all the Rabbeim. This what I have is only from the Rabbeim. How the sinner comes from the mius. You're mius, you're disgusted by it, and therefore you hate it. Sinner comes from the mius.
Not respect.
Ah?
Not respect.
Mius is disgusting. It's oiskelas.
When you don't respect somebody, you disrespect somebody.
Yeah, but this is what this is. If you don't respect some things, you can be apathetic about it. This is not respectful. I'm disgusted by it. I'm disgusted. There's a negative emotion. And the sinner brings to Amiyas. That's what seems to come out from the Mefarshim here. And of course, the sin is to the Ra, and the sin is to the Ra, the Av is to the Toiv. So, now we talk about the terms, yeah? Tzadik Gomor and Tzadik V'Tevlei. Tzadik Gomor and Tzadik V'Tevlei. So the implication is, I'm looking at the notes, that Tzadik Gomor means in his Ahava. Tzadik V'Tevlei means in his sinner. Tzadik V'Tevlei means he has no connection to the Ra whatsoever, so his sin is B'Tachlis. And Tzadik Gomor is his Ahava is Gomor. That's translated here from the Rebbe Rashab. Yeah? But the same is true by tzaddik she'eini gomer, which is the topic of this week. So let's now talk. We're talking now tzaddik she'eini gomer, tzaddik v'ra'aloi. Now we've done this already twice. I'm doing this a third time. Okay. Api nigle, tzaddik she'eini gomer, and tzaddik v'ra'aloi are totally different things. Why? Tzaddik she'eini gomer describes his degree of tzidkis. How righteous is he? There's eini gomer. Tzaddik v'ra'aloi describes what? His matzav hagashmi. Tzaddik means tzaddik v'ra'aloi. In nigla means a tzaddik. I remember being a cheder ingel. Rabbi Yossi Goldstein taught me Tanya. Tzaddik v'ra'aloi. A tzaddik was is nish good. That's how we translate the words, and it's the correct translation. A tzaddik who doesn't have it good begashmias. So api nigla tzaddik v'ra'aloi. And I really remember. I mamish remember. It's 41 years ago. I gedenk. Dos, nicht das sagt dos. Tzaddik v'ra'aloi, tzaddik who has it bad begashmias, and tzaddik she'eini gomer whose connection to Hashem is not absolute. But api Chasidus, the two become one. Api Chasidus, the two become one. Why? Because tzaddik v'ra'aloi is not about his gashmiastic condition. Tzaddik v'ra'aloi is about his ruchniastic condition. What is the meaning of ra'aloi? That inside of him there's some ra. Tzaddik v'ra'aloi means that inside the person there's some ra. Tzaddik v'ra'aloi means that tzaddik, inside the tzaddik there's something which is not good. Therefore, he's a tzaddik she'eini gomer. So again, the Rebbe Rashab would say, tzaddik v'ra'aloi means there's some ra in him. So his sinner ra is not complete, and therefore tzaddik she'eini gomer, his av l'toiv is correspondingly Beis Kavim Shkulim not complete. So tzaddik v'ra'aloi means that inside of him there's ra, but it's kafir for botlatei. A tzaddik has ra, but it doesn't come out. It's hidden. It's hidden on one layer of the neshama, or a different layer of the neshama, a third layer of the neshama. It doesn't come out, but it's there. And therefore, his tzaddik she'eini gomer, his avalatei is not absolutely complete. And like I described to you at length last week and the week before, tzaddikim she'einim gemurim are people. A tzaddik gomer is nicht kein Mensch. A tzaddik gomer is a avuka shel eish. He's a piece of fire. A tzaddik she'eini gomer is a person. We're an avoider. He's working. But then his avoider is on a much, much higher level. The Beinin is avoider. The Baal Tshuva's avoider is dealing with the Yetzer Hara on a balabatish level, on an elementary level, on a day-to-day level. A tzaddik v'ra'aloi and a tzaddik she'eini gomer is fighting with dakos hara. And it's a different kind of milchama, right? The Rebbe used to mention my Fabrein that it says in Sfarim that a tzaddik she'eini gomer who doesn't learn Torah because he's sick is even on bittul Torah. That's the tzaddik she'eini gomer doesn't because he's sick is even bittul Torah. How do you understand that? When you'll be a tzaddik she'eini gomer, you'll understand it. But the avoid of a tzaddik she'eini gomer is an avoid of being of purging out, of cleansing the ra which may be in the system. And again, if you were here last week, we went through the different steps. There's me'ever layam, there's bashamayim, there's rechoikan, there's nefleis. There's 4 different levels of tzaddik. And the lower level of tzaddik is the tzaddik who has to be moved in his midas, remove ra from his midas. The higher level of tzaddik is the tzaddik who has to move ra from his moyach. A higher level of tzaddik is the tzaddik has to move ra from his rotz. And a higher level of tzaddik has to move ra from his tainug. And each tzaddik she'eini gomer has his avodah. And I would imagine, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that just like going from Benyani to tzaddik is a matana, you can't cross from this level to this level. Going from this level of tzaddik to this level of tzaddik, and certainly from going from a tzaddik she'eini gomer to being a tzaddik gomer, I don't think that's only avodah. It's the Eibishter gives you a different kind of a neshama. This is what I think. So let's not waste time. Let's actually read inside. Here we go. Okay? It says the Rebbe, V'tzaddik she'eini gomer. 9 lines from the top of page Tezvav. Page Tezvav in the Tanya. We're learning Perek Yud. V'tzaddik she'eini gomer, who we are now learning about a tzaddik that's not gomer, it's not perfect. Translates the Alter Rebbe. What is the meaning of tzaddik she'eini gomer? He doesn't hate klipa with an absolute hate. And I'm going to say this again. If you hate klipa with an absolute hate, it's a cold hate. If you hate klipa with not an absolute hate, then faket. The closer you are to perfect, the more passionate the hate is. But when you go from eini gomer to gomer, the hatred becomes cold. Because it's not in you, you understand? When a person is emotional about something, it's because of their relationship with it. And a tzaddik gomor, since he has no relationship with Ra, hates Ra absolutely, but it's a cold hate. A tzaddik she'enei gomor hates Ra, and it's a passionate hatred. Says the Rebbe, v'chol she'ein hasinah v'hamiyas b'tachlis. Anyone whose hate and disgust, you hear the Alter Rebbe uses both words, sinah and miyos. And in the Mefarshim it comes out that the sinah comes from the miyos. Hamiyos bo al yedei hasinah. First you have miyos and then you have sinah. Says the Rebbe, okay, nisha reis a shemet, automatically that's a proof that there remains a shemet, a trace, a drop of ahav, or the tiny of the shav, that even though we're dealing with a tzaddik, he has some kind of a love and some kind of a delight in what klipa is. The garments of tzayah, the garments of uncleanness have not been stripped off lagamri completely, completely. Now here the word begodim atzayim is a little bit hard to understand because usually we associate begodim with lavushim, with machshava dibur ma'isa. We're dealing with a tzaddik. A tzaddik on the level of machshava dibur ma'isa doesn't have levushim atzayim. So this is a different meaning of the word begodim atzayim. I don't know exactly what it means, but a tzaddik she'enei gomor has in him a connection to Ra, and that's why his hatred for Ra is not complete. Ela it is only shehu botol b'miyutim. In the tzaddik she'enei gomor, the bottle is the Ra is bittul in its insignificance. Ukloch hashiv, and its worth is like nothing, its expression is like nothing. V'lachei nikra tzaddik v'ra. That's why he's called tzaddik as Ra, but the Ra inside of him is kafaf ubatel atayv, ubatel lei. So it's tzaddik v'ra loy means a tzaddik who owns his Ra. You see, tzaddik v'ra loy, that the Ra is his. The Ra is kafaf ubatel to him. He has Ra inside of him, it's kafaf ubatel. And of course, this is the discussion that we had, that the very minimum is that a person has a Yosef and Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Tev, we learned this on the last Pedic, which took us a while. It's trying to take over the whole city. Yetzer Hara is trying to take over the whole city. Yeah, they're fighting, and they wrestle, and they engage. A tzaddik has quieted the Yetzer Hara. It doesn't bother him. But there's different madregas of the Yetzer Hara, and there's different madregas of the quieting of the Yetzer Hara. So whatever specific, what particular level the tzaddik is on, that's the degree of the Ra Aloy, the Rabbi Kafaf Abak. There's lower tzaddikim, she'einam gemurim, there's tzaddikim she'einam gemurim that are just outside the realm of Beinani. And there are higher madregas of tzaddikim she'einam gemurim, which are very close to madrega of tzaddik gomor. So there's a lot of levels. The difference between one level of tzaddik v'ra and another tzaddik level is the degree to which the Ra inside of him is Kafaf Abak Latev. But in all cases, you have these two ideas. Idea number one, the Ra has no expression. And idea number two, the Ra is still there. Let's continue to read. Valkain, and accordingly, Gam Avosei Hashem. Automatically, his love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu Einei B'tachas is not an absolute love. Which is why I call it tzaddik gomor. So you see clearly what I told you, and I didn't make it up. It's Mamaimed in the Rebbe Rashab. Okay, what's clearly that tzaddik she'enei gomor and tzaddik gomor is used in Chassidus in association with Ra. Tzaddik gomor, I'm sorry, tzaddik v'ra loy. I made a mistake. I want to say it again. Tzaddik v'tev loy and tzaddik v'ra loy is used about his connection to Ra. Tzaddik v'tev loy, there's no Ra. The Ra has become Tev. Tzaddik v'ra loy, that means there's Ra inside of him. It's bottle. The other two terms. So the idea of sinah. The sinah for Ra is represented by tzaddik v'tev loy and tzaddik v'ra loy. But the Avat Hashem, this is tzaddik gomor and tzaddik she'enei gomor. The Alter Rebbe says clearly, "V'lachein nikra tzaddik Avas el Hashem eina betachlis." Love for the Eibush is not complete, and therefore he's called a tzaddik she'enei gomor. So the terms tzaddik gomor, tzaddik she'enei gomor, showing his love for Hashem, and the terms tzaddik v'tevlei, tzaddik v'ralei, showing his hatred for evil. I'm continuing. Okay, anybody want to say anything? I mean, the violet negonish glend, but you touched even. I mean, we learned. We just simple, no great chedushim. Hine. If anybody wants to speak, feel free. Madregezu, in the category of tzaddik v'ralei, mischalekes l'nei v'veis madreges. There are myriads of different levels. There's so many different madreges of tzaddik. In other words, it's not, if you're not a Beinani, you're a tzaddik v'ralei. There's so many madregis in Teres Sholem Avot, which I always bring in, even though I don't think it's a correct mashal, but it's a mashal. The Rebbe Rashab was a Rebbe. He was a serious man. So you remember Emke Sfas Yesed, there was no, or Sfas Cholach. He didn't say things to speak. And he certainly didn't say things to be Wertlenzach, to sound cliché-ish, to sound cool. But there are occasions where the Rebbe Rashab starts talking about the Alter Rebbe, and you could almost feel the way he feels about the great Alter Rebbe. There's a famous Chavdal Tevis Samach Zayin. It's printed in the Teres Sholem, a very big kitzur. The Rebbe Rayatz was with the free Rebbe Rashab alone, maybe one or two more people, and the Rebbe Rashab started talking about the Alter Rebbe, mamish plois. Amongst the things that he said was that the Friedik is an Nish Gewen Gresser for him. The earlier generations, which means that the Achreinim and the Rishayim and the Goinim and the Ta'amiroyim and the Tanoim and the Nevi'im were not great. The Lashon that they ever used was that if it would have been in the times of the Rishayim, it would have been a Rishon, in the times of the Amiroyim, the Goinim would have been a Gon, in times of the Amiroyim would have been an Amoyed, in times of the Tana, in times of the Nevi'im and Navi. Hecha Vilich Nishrein. He went till Nevi'im. Now what's higher than Nevi'im? Basic Nish. But he said, Hecha Vilich, not he can't. I will not. The Rebbe Rashab spoke about the Alter Rebbe Mamish, even from the floor. So one of the l'sheinis that we have is that the Alter Rebbe gishtan hecher for Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had Chamisha Talmidim. Amongst Chamisha Talmidim is Rabbi Lezer ben Horkenes, Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, who are the Rebbes of Rabbi Akiva. You understand Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is? He was the Talmidei Hillel, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And the Rebbe said, the Rebbe Rashab said that the Alter Rebbe is standing in a higher madrega of Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he brought a raya from a Maaseh. As Yochanan ben Zakkai said about himself, you all know this, you just forgot that you know it. As soon as I said, you're going to start nodding. I don't know which way I'm going to be going. And of course, in my Mari Chasidus, there's more than one explanation. How could Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai not know? The Alter Rebbe said to his Chassidim, Chapt rein yitzte, weil später wird die Klamke zu mein Tier in Gan Eden nicht kennen treffen. Alter Rebbe said to his Chassidim, Chaparai now, in other words, bin Neshama Beguf, because later you won't be able to find the knob to my door in Gan Eden. So the Rebbe Rashab said, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, in any Yedeya, I don't know. And the Alter Rebbe is not only Yedeya be'ezeh derech, but he knows be'ezeh hechel and be'ezeh cheder. You understand? So the Rebbe Rashab said about the Alter Rebbe that he's standing higher than Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And in that conversation, I think there's also a word with regard to Rabbi Kalina. Rabbi Kalina was a Zachar Ois. He knew everything. He knew everything. And the Rebbe Rashab is trying to bring out, in other words, if you were in the Zal Ames and you thought on Machshava, he knew it. He heard everything. That the Einarech, so he said a Lashon, and I forgot about something, what, but some of the Rabbi Kalina said, Fadem daf mazayin ein tefach echafaderet. To do this thing that the Rabbi Kalina did, to be one tefach above the ground, as opposed to the Alter Rebbe, who was standing at a much, much higher level. I'm bringing up these verte just to bring out the point that what do we know about tzaddikim? Nothing. You know, it would be nice if we could look at one, angucken mit der Fleischgeugen auf a tzaddik. I feel a tzaddik saying, "Chotchik zen anerle cherid." Yeah, a tzaddik. We don't understand anything about madregas tzaddik, but the Alter Rebbe should understand that it's not black and white. It's not you go out of the madrega of Beinin and go to the madrega of tzaddik. Oh. There's just like in Beinin and in Bailei Tshuva and in the Shoyim, there's so many different degrees. Tzaddikim is the same thing. There's taka a lot of tzaddikim. Historically, there have been many tzaddikim, and the tzaddikim don't all stand in the same place. And the differences between a tzaddik and a tzaddik could be so extraordinary, so big, so vast, and you have to understand the differences among tzaddikim. And he explains, well, he says, yeah, says the Rebbe v'hinei madregezu, this level of tzaddik, which is also tzaddik v'rala. Mitchalekes divides itself up l'ribeves madreges to tens of thousands of levels. Be'inyin bechinas miyotara, to the degree to which the ra is bottled to the teiv. Hanisha, which remains me'achas me'arba yeseides hayroyim, for one of the four evil elements. And I mentioned this to you once before that I sort of got this idea from someplace. That the Dalad you say this like the Etzem, the Etzem at Nefesh HaBahamis is the Klipa of Eish, which is Kas and Gaiva, the Klipa of Mayim, which is Taivas and Tanugim, and the four things Alter Rebbe mentions in Perek Aleph, about the Nefesh HaBahamis. So some people have a Ra in the Nefesh HaBahamis left. We're talking about tzaddikim. That's from the Eish, some from the Ruach, some from the Mayim, and some from the Offer. And it's Kafu Batal Lateiv. Kafu Batal Lateiv means it has no expression. A person walks on this earth, inside of him there's Ra, and it has doesn't come out. All you see and all there is in his daily life is tzaddik, because the Ra is Kafu Batal Lateiv. It's bottle, it's completely nullified to the Ra, even though it's there. And he gives 3 examples. Ube'inyin bitulei b'miyutei, in the degree of its bittul. Number 1, b'shishim al derech mashal. Like if you would say that the tzaddik is 59% toiv and 1% ra, or 60% toiv and 1% ra. Or be'elef, where the tzaddik is 999% parts good and 1 part bad, or 1,000 parts good and 1 part bad. Urevava, or 10,000 parts good and 1 part bad, or 9,999 parts good and 1 part bad. Ukiyetze al derech moshe. And similar things by way of analogy. The Rebbe, of course, wants to know why the Alter Rebbe puts in the word ukiyetze, and he suggests that the Alter Rebbe wants to allude to what's called in the next Perek bekamas beichas. He gives 3 degrees of bittul. That the ra, the evil in the tzaddik, is bottled to the good in like 60, like 1,000, and like 10,000. That's kamos. It's a certain quantity. And the kiyetze means a be'echos. There could be differences between one tzaddik and the other, and the quality of their ra, which is hidden in their nefesh.
How does this tzaddik know
where he's holding? There's only one where tzaddik. No, he's holding another tzaddik. It says in the Gemara, "Afilu kol ha'elam kulei eimam v'chatzadik ata yei b'neicha grash." This is a message to a tzaddik. To get hadracha on madregis tzaddik, you need a bigger tzaddik. It's a maven, you know. In the Chabad tradition, it's at the chachem. Yeah, in the Chabad tradition, it's brought down that the Rebbe Maharash said to the Radatz, he's a Zayd of yours, right? Said to the Radatz, he's a Zayd, he's an uncle. You're a Meir Simcha's an uncle. I don't think Meir Simcha Radatz's son.
No.
It's our uncle. Es ist Zeit zu trachten wegen Avedes HaTzadikim. That's the expression. I saw it in the Rishimas of Chassidim. It's so interesting. A Rebbe says to a Chassid, it's time to think about Avedes HaTzadikim. In other words, you don't take this by yourself. B'chlal, Hadrach and Pnimis, you need to have a Rebbe. Bemis, you know. But when it comes to, and the same is your tzaddik, only a tzaddik can help a tzaddik in the avoida Pnimis of a tzaddik. But I would imagine that at a certain point, a tzaddik has a particular understanding of where he's holding. And you look, there's a lot of svarim that we all read. They're not written for us. They're written for tzaddikim. Really, Sifrei Musar, there's pieces of Zohar. There's a lot of inyonim, Sifrei Kabbalah, which read, you know, black and, you know, 2-dimensionally, describing do this for this, do this for this, and it's b'chlal not talking for anoshim kerkeinu, it's madregis of tzaddikim. I would imagine that a tzaddik has some awareness of himself and he knows where he's holding, but there's no doubt that the more pnimistic a person is, the more that person is in need of a rebbe. A simple person, his avoid is simple. Anybody can be madrichim. A tzaddik, more than anybody else, needs a rebbe to teach him where his avoid is and what and so on and so forth. I was thinking last night, I don't know why I was thinking it. I was standing and I was davening Ma'ariv and I was thinking about this. It was bothering me. Oh, you know what it was? Because I didn't Mama said that. I was Mama said it this morning. Shabbos Varcham, I don't get anything done because I have a shir in the morning. If I bring it in the afternoon and then a shir in the afternoon, I don't have a chance. So after Shabbos, when everyone's davening Ma'ariv, I sit down and I say Tehillim. Whatever. There's a reason why I keep Shabbos till I finish Tehillim. But I wasn't Mama said it. I was thinking about this as I was finishing Tehillim and davening Ma'ariv. That Tanya Maroza, Tanya Maroza forgot one parasha to Imam Sedre. There's 54 parashas in the Chumash, 53 parashas in the Chumash. He forgot one said he didn't do Imam Sedre. So he came to the Rebbe Rashab to ask for a tikkun. So the Rebbe Rashab said he should sit down and he should be married the entire Chamisha Chumash Teira from Bereshis. I think maybe he forgot which parsha it was. So he's remembered the whole Chumash. And I'm thinking, what kind of cruelty is that? You know how boring Shleimik Vechatagim is? It's not, you know, it's not fun. You have to do it. It's Rabbi, you have to work to do it. You have to do it. Yeah. It says in the Rishimis that the Rabbeim did Shnai Mikra Vechatagim with such a gishma, such a koch, If you would watch them, you would think that these people were unemployed. They had nothing else to do. To such a the Frierdiker Rebbe describes how his father did Shnai Mikra Vecha Targum. It was like there was nothing else in the world. So I'm thinking, was for a ticket it does? Was for a ticket it does? What kind of ticket is this? The Chanya Razav has nothing to do with his time. He was a busy man. He was the Rebbe's maskir. You want to fix? You missed one parsha. Go back to Bereshis. Do each parsha in the entire Chamisha Chumshe Teresh Dayim Mikra Vecha Targum. It could be it was around Simchas Torah time. It was around the end of the year or something like that. What's the teretz? Don't worry, the Rebbe is not going to give you that thing. You come to the Rebbe, you say, he's not going to say to you, do from Bereshis. Chanya was Chanya. In other words, this happens a lot with the kids, yeah? Where you see the Rebbe is mean. The Chassidus is mean. The Rebbe is not mean, the Rebbe is not Chassidus, it's each person and his madrege. And in a higher, the Rebbe Rashab was telling him how to fix it. Whatever Shnai Mikra Vecha Targum is, and I don't know what it is, but the Rebbe knows what it is. This is the tikkun. You missed Shnai Mikra, but I want to correct it. This is how it's corrected. No, Chanya was Lachatchila Sheba Lachatchila. He was a big chassid in his time. He was a very big chassid. So the Rebbe did him a favor. The Rebbe said, Avos Yisrael told him the correct correction. Now, it's not an easy correction, but it's the correct correction. Another person,
Rebbe could have told him which one he missed.
But I think that wasn't the issue. I think the issue was Ahmed Avgein al Asayde. This is Pnimi. It was. I forgot where I read it, but I remember. So the garnish. So everything goes in madreges, and where a person is, the facts where they're holding. So what the Rebbe interesting? The Rebbe has a very interesting question, and I think it's worth mentioning. I don't like to go into details, pshetlach, because they take away from the ikir. The Rebbe says, the Rebbe's footnotes here are go'oines adira, poshet and nigle. Where you have bittul b'shishim, the Rebbe says three things: bittul b'shishim, bittul be'ela, bittul be'revava. The Rebbe finds mokedes for it. There's no such thing in halacha. In halacha, there's bittul b'shishim, bittul b'meya, bittul b'masayim, and that's it. The highest bittul, asr ba'anah, is bittul b'masayim. There's no more than bittul b'masayim in halacha. The Rebbe found that Rambam. Found the Rambam, which makes reference to bittul be'elef, and then when you get to Revava, the Rebbe found Gemaras, but there's no place where you have bittul be'revava. There's no such get in halacha. Why doesn't the Alter Rebbe say bittul be'reiv? Bittul be'reiv, he doesn't mention it. He mentions bittul b'shishim. The Rebbe asks.
There is such a get.
Of course there is. It says bittul b'shishim, bittul be'elef. Why doesn't it mention bittul b'shishim? The Rebbe answers poshet. Because bittul be'reiv is only min b'minei. If it's the same type. If you have a mix-up with two pieces of meat that are the same, so then if you have two and one, so then you have bittul bereiv. Bittul b'she'enei minei doesn't help bittul bereiv because it has its neis and tam. If there are different min, they give flavor. And give flavor, you have to be mevatel the tam. The chacham will meshayir that the bittul of tam is shishim. There says yetzer teva and yetzer hara is min b'she'enei minei. The Rebbe says. It's Tev and Yetzer Hara is min b'she'enei minei. So if you say Yetzer b'she'enei minei, bittul bereiv is not going to help. You have to have bittul b'shishim. You have to remove the ganzen tam. And even when you remove the ganzen tam, that's still only tzaddik v'ra'ale. Anyway, let's continue to read. Weiter in a wenig. Jo. Says the Rebbe, hey. And this is Bechina Sadikim Harabim Shebachol Adres. The multitude, the many different Sadikim which are in all generations. The Isa B'Gemara, the Gemara says, Tamneiser Alpha Tzadikim, there are 18,000 Tzadikim, that stand in front of the Eibishter. Now, this idea of Tamneiser Alpha Tzadikim, it's not, I don't think it's a fixed number that in every generation there's 18,000, or in the whole of history there's 18,000. There's an Indian Pneumat. The Rebbe brings three different explanations for why the Rebbe's father brings three different explanations for why the Gemara chaps on the Rebbe 18,000 tzaddikim. There's a tzaddik shenigam, tzaddik v'ra'ala. He's a yid, he's a servant of Hashem, and he's a mensch. He's a boss of Adam, like me and you. He's not perfect. He's shaykhs to make a mistake. He's shaykhs to forget something. But he's madrega tzaddik, he's high level. So the Gemara says there's 18,000 tzaddikim in this madrega. So what I want to add to this is the following: that the Rebbe has a sikha in Chelik Vav. Look at the sikhas where the Rebbe talks about madregas of tzaddik. And I'm going to come back to the Sikha later in this Pedic, because later in this Pedic we're going to be talking about different madregas of Tzaddik Gomer. You see the next words, Achal, Mailet, Tzaddik Gomer, we're going back to Tzaddik Gomer. So there's 5 different levels of Tzaddik, the Rebbe lists, okay? The first one, the Tzaddik She'enei Gomer, is called Tavdeisa Alvar Tzaddik Kamei Kamei Kuchabrichu, and the second madrege is a Lamed Vav Tzaddikim. And it seems to me, and I looked up the Sikha this morning, but there's not enough detail, that even the Lamed Vav Tzaddikim is madrege of Tzaddik Gomer. Tzaddik Gomer. And then the third level is madrege called Bnei Aliyah, which we're going to be having soon. And in Bnei Aliyah, the Rebbe divides it up into 3 levels. But what the Rebbe says is, I just want to share these details, yeah? A Tzaddik She'enei Gomer, a Tzaddik She'enei Gomer. When it comes to Tzaddikim Gemurim, there are 2 basic classes. The first class is Aile Babar. And the second class is Aile Beloy Bar. And I'll tell you what that means in English. Aile Babar means you want to come into the king, you need a reason. You need a reason. You want to come into the king, you need a reason. Aile Babar. Babar means, in Yiddish, hober. You have to come with material, with chayre, with stuff, yeah. Aile Beloy Bar, you come in without any, you don't need to have any preparation. So a Tzaddik She'enei Gomer, certainly, if you could say by a Tzaddik She'enei Gomer that he goes into the Melech, it's for sure, you can't go stam as it. The Lamed Vav Tzaddikim are also Tzaddikim Gemurim, if I understood it correctly. But they're Aile Baba, they can come into Lakus, to Meibishn, in other words, without a Hachone and a Achshore. And then the higher Madrega, Bnei Aliyah is Aile Beloy Bar. Their connection to the Eibishter is an Inyan in itself, not just what they bring or where they're holding and so on and so forth. There's a lot of different Madregas that's Tzaddikim Gemurim that existed historically. In Chassidus, the Rabbeim, the Alter Rebbe, they say about the Alter Rebbe that he had Kama V'Kama Tzaddikim, Chassidim, who were Madregas Tzaddik. The Alter Rebbe had Chassidim, Madregas Tzaddik. We know stories about Chassidim, that Madregas Tzaddik. L'moshel, Reb Shmuel Munkes. You say to Shmuel Munkes, he's like the Lubavitcher Hershel Astrapola, you understand? And Hershel Astrapola was also not a Poshterid. He was a maskir of the Baruch Meshbash, I think. But the Shmuel Munkes was not at all a Poshterid. The Alter Rebbe was arrested. With whom did he consult? The Alter Rebbe was arrested. They wanted to take him away, and it was a Sakonos Nefashim. They took him away in a black chariot, which he didn't. It was for the worst kind of criminals. The Alter Rebbe was the Yashiv with Shmuel Munkes, with Harav Shmuel Munkes, Reb Shmuel Munkes. And if Shmuel Munkes told him to go, as we all know the story, the Alter Rebbe was not discussing with Shmuel Munkes because there was nobody else around. He was Misyashiv with Shmuel Munkes because with Shmuel Munkes hat man sich gekannt. The Alter Rebbe could. The Shmuel Munkes was a chassid, and Mekusha, and all those other things. But the Shmuel Munkes was the kind of man Alter Rebbe could consult about this kind of a question. I'll just share with you a little bit about the Shmuel Munkes. First of all, I heard from my Malam Rabbi Fuchs. I told you this many times that he used to. Whenever I would see him, he would tell me about it. So one of the examples that he heard from, I think he heard directly from Friedrich Rebbe, that the Friedrich Rebbe once said in Poland, "Amen sagt Shmuel Munkes, meg men sagen a Reb, had gehad Gili Eliyahu." When you say Shmuel Munkes, it's okay to say Reb Shmuel Munkes, had gehad Gili Eliyahu, Shmuel Munkes Gili Eliyahu. So there's Kama V'Kama Sipur about the Shmuel Munkes. The story with the Reya you all know, the lungs, right? This is Mesichas. Friedrich Rebbe tells this mice. It was a Fabrein, and they ran out of Farbeisen, and they went to the butcher to bring more Farbeisen, and he wasn't home. His wife gave them a lung, and it turned out to be treif. But nobody knew. It doesn't say on the lung treif. So they put it on the table. And the custom of the old country was that shachtim, you couldn't make a living from anything. You had to do a 50 million jobs. Yeah? The sheikhet had different jobs. But one of the jobs, the sheikhet was, of course, he was a sheikhet. How much could they pay for a shechita? Whatever they paid, but you didn't make a living. So part of the panos of the sheikhet, there are certain parts of the animal automatically his. Which parts? The parts that you can't eat. The lungs, which nobody eats. It goes in the garbage today. The sheikhet got the reya. And other such parts, I think the brain. The sheikhet got the parts of the animal no one wants to eat. And him it was pashat chayoyna. So there probably was a way to make a lung, they should be able to chew it. It's like rubber bands. How do you? The whole thing is bellows. But anyway, so his wife had prepared it, and she gave it to the chassidim, And then she came running later and said that they shouldn't eat it. Her husband came home and said it wasn't kosher. But Shmuel Munkus took the plate to himself, and he wouldn't let anybody take it. You know this Maisa, right? You know this Maisa. And when the Chassidim wouldn't let go, he ran away from the table and started dancing. And when they were cornered him, he threw the whole thing at the sheikh. He threw it in the garbage. So they put him down on the table and then gave him korkes, schmitz. Then when the sheikh's wife came again and said, I hope you didn't eat it. So now, they looked at the Shmuel quite differently. Yeah? Darf noch geben weiter schmitz. Why? A chassid told sich nicht brav ka kunzen. A chassid is not allowed to do kunzen. They used to call it tricks. So the Shmuel very happily climbed on the table a second time. I'm going to give noch einmal schmitz. But the second schmitz was a bisschen anders with the erste schmitz. And of course the story was that they said to the Shmuel Munkes, how did you know? He said, Pashit, als ich bin beim Rebbe ersten Mal, als wir der Alte Rebbe the first time, hat mir gesagt, als jede Sache, was man will sich sehen, soll man nicht haben. Anything you really want, you shouldn't have. So when they brought in this, said, hey, I really wanted it. So no, I shouldn't have it. And then I saw how everybody else wanted it. So I knew that nobody should have it. So I threw it in the garbage. This is Shmuel Munkes' Meises, weißt du? This is Shmuel Munkes' Meises. The zweite Meis, I'm just going to tell you 3 stories, was the Meis mit dem Shlomo Karliner, as they erzählt sich. I don't know this is the Sichas or not. I don't remember that he came to the Alter Rebbe for Tisha B'Av. And the Chassidim were throwing beralach. And it says in the Rebbe's Reshimis that it was loy shaloi b'tzed chachamim. The Rabbeim knew that on Tisha B'Av Chassidim commanded, they're not so frum about the Avelis, and the Rabbeim tolerated it. They didn't come out against it. The Rabbeim were not objecting to the fact that the way Chassidim behaved on Tisha B'Av was l'cheire, not the way you're supposed to behave. And one of the better lechlarim did the Shmuel Munkes, the Shlomo Karliner bit. Shlomo Karliner was a tzaddik gomer. Shlomo Karliner was a tzaddik gomer, a Talmud of the Magi, the Chaver of the Alter Rebbe. So he turns to the Alter Rebbe and he says, "Tzli bazelcha, younger light is chorig van the Beis Hamikdash." The chutzpah was mavel. Whoever he was, to throw a beryl into the beard of Shlomo Karliner was a chutzpah. It was a sakana also, you should know. He was playing with fire. The Alter Rebbe didn't respond, and the next day, afternoon, the Alter Rebbe took a spatzir with the Shlomo Karliner, and they came to the forest, a younger man sitting on a nest of meat-eating ants, and saying kinnis with bechiyas. So the Shlomo Karliner says to the Alter Rebbe, "Uns lieber solche junge Leute, for such young men, the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt." So the Alter Rebbe said to him, "This is the same younger man." And the third story, this is the Rebbe's Reshimis, that the Shmuel Munkes at the end of his life was a nister. He was, apparently, I don't know how long he lived, but you don't hear about the Shmuel Munkes by the Middle Rebbe, by the Tzemach Tzedek. We don't know when he passed away. We know that he was an alman, he had no husband, no wife, he lost his wife very young. We know that he had a bas yechida, he had a single daughter whom he married off, that's another story. And we also know that he was a moidendik man, he was so poor, oni shebanim. But at the end of his life, he had an hug of like a nister. So he was in a certain place, and we know which city he came from, we know his last name, we know which city he came from. It says in the Likutei Devarim. So at the end of his life, he would walk around in the fields, in the forest, and spazieren in the Wälder and the Felder. He did like you read in the Zechrenes about the golden age of Tzaddikim that started before Chassidus. And all the farmers, including the Goyim, made all kinds of tricks that he should dafka step on their plants, dafka step on the produce, because wherever he stepped was a bracha. Everybody knew when Shmuel Munkes steps is a bracha, and they would do all kinds of schemes that wherever he should step there should be bracha. Shmuel Munkes. And of course, the story that's brought in the Poilishas for him, I think it's true. Again, I don't know if it's true, but it's out that it was a Greisa Chasane. It was the Alter Rebbe had 2 Greisa Chasanes. One was with Liadi, and the other one was with Chernobyl. This one was in Chernobyl, according to the Poilisha. Yeah. The Zlobene Chasane was the Baditcheve Chasane. The Baditcheve did not want the Alter Rebbe to travel to him. The Alter Rebbe did not want each one was worried, so they made it halfway. Shlob. But the Chernobyl Chasane, he was in Chernobyl. And there were a lot of tzaddikim, and the Shmuel Munkes was the Batchan. When er gesagt Batchanes of Alaman, auf Nalten Rebbe hat Meide gehabt zu sagen, he started off with all the tzaddikim. The Shmuel Munkes was not a Poshterid, and by the Chasane he said Batchanes. Anyway, so the Alter Rebbe says, Loma Negora, was mit mir? So Shmuel Munkes hat gesagt, was sagt man? Was ist der Unterschied zwischen mir mit dem Rebbe? Was ich weiß der Rebbe. Ja? Na, aber dann da Sachen, was der Rebbe weiß, was ich weiß nicht. Aber wie viele da, was der Eibischte weiß, was nicht ich und nicht der Rebbe weiß. I'm not giving it over correctly, but this is the Teuchen. It was about Chodes, yes? He said, it's what I know the Rebbe knows. No, there's things the Rebbe knows that I don't know. But how much is there that the Rebbe and I are the same because we both don't know that the Eibishter knows? This was the Bat Chodes from Moses. And I just want to mention one more chassid. We're talking about tzaddikim without the Rebbe. The Michal HaPotzke. You don't hear about the Michal HaPotzke. But it says, and I read this, I didn't make it up, that the Alter Rebbe said, I tell this to you often, because it's really a special word. The Alter Rebbe said, Ich kum dem Eibishten a speziellen Dank für meine Chassidim. I owe Hashem a special thank you for my Chassidim. Und Gott a speziellen Dank for Rav Achose de Rav Remechol. I owe a special thank you for Rav Achose Remechol, the Michal HaPotzke. The story of Michal HaPotzke is that his father was by the Baal Shem Tov. And I forgot his name, but it says in the Kutut Purim. His father was the Baal Shem Tov. And he was a shoysich, he never opened his mouth. And the Michal HaPotzke was a Ben Zekunim. Michal HaPotzke was born when his parents were very old. So somebody said to the Baal Shem Tov, Azad Tzaddik, such a big Baal Madrege, he doesn't speak. So the Baal Shem Tov said, Ervet Hab Mazun, was wird sein Talmid Talmidi, und wird reden farem euch. The Baal Shem Tov said, he will have a son who will be a student of my student, and he'll speak for his father also. This is the Michal HaPotzke. The Michal HaPotzke was a Baal Madrege. And when he get to the Michal HaPotzke, he lived on a second floor. On a second floor. In the shtetl, there was no such thing as two-story homes. Land, real estate was not a problem. Building material was a problem. To have a two-story house, it wasn't only you had to have the right material to build. Then they made from wood; they didn't make from stone. And the Michal HaPotzke locked on the second floor, and the reason was, ich kann nicht vertragen der Reach von Menschenfleisch. I can't stand the smell of human flesh. The Michal HaPotzke was a big tzaddik. He couldn't. A Rebbe can always vertragen. You understand? That's the job of a Rebbe. That he has to take it all. The Rabbi used to say that a Rebbe has to tolerate the covet, and the Chassidim kennen mit dem nicht kommen. The Michal HaPotzke, I can't stand the smell of human flesh. There's a Michal HaPotzke. The Michal HaPotzke. The Alter Rebbe went to jail. So he gave instruction that it make sure that the Michal HaPotzke shouldn't go to Peterburg. Als Michal wird kommen ke Peterburg, wird verbrennen ganz Peterburg. Und das ist nicht der Kavone. Hörst du Wort? Alter Rebbe said, I think he said it about 10 Hasidim, but one of them, Michal, make sure he doesn't go to Peterburg where I am, because then he'll push it, burn the city down. He'll burn the city down. Und das ist nicht der Kavone. We know that the Baruch Meshebesher said to the Alter Rebbe, he shouldn't have gone to Peterburg. But Abdurrahman on Ibn Lebenish. You go over it, you didn't do anything, yeah? It says in the Rishimis, there used to be a word by Chassidim, which apparently is not true. There used to be a word by Chassidim, and again to the Michal HaPotzke. The Michal HaPotzke did not go to the Middle Rebbe, and he did not go to the Tzemach Tzedek. He didn't go, he went to the Alter Rebbe. So when I was growing up, I remember my Mashpia, I remember which Mashpia, who told us that the Michal HaPotzke said that I went to the Alter Rebbe, I gave my Yechida. So now, if I go to the Middle Rebbe, my Yechida I already gave away. To go to the Rebbe and not give, I can't. The Michal HaPotzke. Yeah? This was a story that's been told in the history, in the annals of Chassidim for 150 years. Yeah? In the Rebbe's Rishimis, you have a different story, which is an interesting story. That the Michal said when he get to the Middle Rebbe, ich kennen seine Daud Ames nicht stehen, aber wenn ich gehe to the Tzemach Tzedek, ich kann mit dem nicht stehen unter dem Brett. He said, but I get to the Middle Rebbe, I can't be in his Dalet Ames. And when I get to the Tzemach Tzedek, I can't be under the same roof. Because the Michal HaPotzke saw that the second Rebbe was greater than the first. And the third was greater than the second. Because by the Alter Rebbe, he went. By the Middle Rebbe, I can't be in his Dalet Ames. By the Tzemach Tzedek, he couldn't be under one Makif. This is the Michal HaPotzke that went. But the Rabbeim used to send to him Yungalite for Adracha. And through these Yungalite, he would send messages to Lubavitch. So the story that you all know is the Maisa with the Rashbats. That the Rashbats, he came from Shvinciana, I think. He came from a very stark and snagdische Stadt. They beat him up for becoming a chassid. And with a very shiktzah pot, he was by the Michal for a Mesher's man. And then he came to Lubavitch. when he came to Lubavitch, he came to with a zettel from Reb Michal. And by the way, it says when he came, Erev Shabbos Kedesh, Mishpatim, I think, and it says by him, he came to Tafresh Tes, by Rashbatz it's written, as by em jeden Yor, ich by em Yemeledes. The day that he came to Lubavitch, he would probably Yemeledes, not according to the days of the month, but according to the days of the week. I think it was Friday at Mishpatim. Every year, you can look at Yem, he would probably Yemeledes. But anyway, so Michal Apotzka gave him a letter. And he warned him not to open it. He was so curious to see what the Michal is writing, and he opened it, and it was a blank piece of paper. And the Michal Apotzka warned him that if he opens it, there's going to be a negative consequence. And he paid very dearly for this. He paid throughout his life for this mistake. Anyway, he came mitnacht, late at night, and he lay down on a bench, was fatog. He went to the upper one zach. And versteht sich, he was before mikveh. He was not thinking in terms of reingehen zum Rebbe Bechlal. And mitamol, the Mishoras comes out, and he says loud, "Is a mitzvah from Rebbe Michal? Anybody Michal?" He was sleeping. Nobody knew who he was. It was a bachel. So the Mishoras came out and screamed, "Is anybody from Michal?" He looked around and left, and then he came back a couple of times until someone asked him, "Are you coming from Rebbe Michal?" He says, "Yeah." "Do you have a zettel from Rebbe Michal?" He says, "Yeah." The Rebbe wants it, so he takes it out of his kiss, and he gives it to him. He says, No. You're going to have to bring it in yourself. So he had to go in without any achonah. And he walked into the Tzemach Tzedek. As soon as the letter arrived in Lubavitch, Tzemach Tzedek knew it was there and he wanted it. And he handed it to the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek opened it. Custom geleint. Tzemach Tzedek said, "You read it." As soon as the Tzemach Tzedek opened the paper, the Tzemach Tzedek said, "You read it." In other words, on both sides he got it. So ich meine, sie gewinnen Chassidim, der Rashbatz, not the Rashbatz. I told you for the Radatz, the Rebbe Marash told him, okay, so next week we'll do Tzadik Gomer or Mitzvah Shem, whatever it is, Bnei Aliyah, Hayam Adek Tzadik Gomer. And we'll take a break and do a Yem Yem. Okay.
You said something like a Tzadik to make a mistake.
Yeah, of course.
On what level? Not a mashal
No, also the Maisa with the Baron Strashele, that because of his Gevurus with himself, he had Gevurus with another. That's a mistake of a tzaddik. There's stories which are very disturbing in the history of Chassidim. Yudel Chitrik has it in his Sefer. It could be in other places as well. That the Baal Shem Tov wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael, and according to some, he wanted to Eretz Yisrael to meet Chaim HaKadosh. So there's 3 different stories, of which I know 2. I don't know the 3rd story. And one of the stories is that in still a Nister, there were a group of bandits, Ganovim, who were Rotzchim, they were murderers, Sheididim, who had a cave, a hideout near where he was, and they saw Ployim about the Baal Shem Tov, so they were Mechabed the Baal Shem Tov. That's Baal Shem Tov for a bracha. Baal Shem Tov said, if they don't hurt any Jew, he'll give them a bracha. And the Baal Shem Tov told them that he has a desire to go to Eretz Yisrael. Anyway, they came back after a long hiatus, and they told them they found a way to go to Eretz Yisrael, and you don't have to go on a boat, you can go on land. And the Baal Shem Tov walked with them for weeks, for a very, very long time. And then they came to a canal, a crevice in the ground, and there was no bridge. So the only way to cross was you would take a tree, you would lower it to the bottom, and you would catapult across. So each one take a turn. You run back, you grab the tree, you run, and you fling yourself to the opposite side. When it came to Baal Shem Tov's turn, the Baal Shem Tov saw Beruach Kodesh that this was the entrance to Gan Eden. The entrance to Gan Eden. That if he crosses over, there's a lot of Acherev Amesapeches, and the Achmanu Litzlan will end his life. So the Baal Shem Tov suddenly says to these Shoidedim, I changed my mind. They were so angry with him. They spent all this time looking for this way. They schlepped them all this way. But the Baal Shem Tov knew that this is not a game. So I don't know how he appeased them, but they turned around and went back. As they're going back, the Baal Shem Tov is thinking to himself, everything is Ba'ashgocha Paratis. So what's the Ashgocha Yen that I should waste? It was several months. walking with these rotzchim, sheididim, low lives for nothing. As I gained it, they came to a lake, a fresh body of water. And by the lake there was a frog, and the frog was a freak. It was as tall as a man. It was a very large frog. And the Baal Shem Tov saw that in this frog was a gilgul. So the Baal Shem Tov took a little water. He spoke to the gilgul. He says, "Who are you?" He says, "I lived 700 years ago." Another from time to the Rishonim. And I was a tzaddik. And I was once mezalzel in the Tilas Yadayim. Once mezalzel in the Tilas Yadayim, which is only a D'Rabbanan. And my oynish was that I was given this yonis until I became a Rosh HaGomer. So he started out as a tzaddik. And then, in other words, it's not a simple situation. And as a result of this, they're not even judging me. Forget about Gehenim. Forget about Gan Eden. I can't even be judged. And my neshama is misgalgal, always in an animal connected to water, because my Aveda wasn't this. So Hashem took a cup of water, he drank it with a bracha, and the frog died. So the whole reason for this whole business was to remind the neshama of one tzaddik. So what's made a tzaddik sheni gomer? It's complicated. Talk about Taos, mistakes, Avedas. Okay, let's do Hayom Yom, yeah?